Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Audrey Rillisbacher, author of The Mission Driven Life and founder of The Mission Driven Mom. And today we're going to talk about communication. And I know that may fall a little flat. We have this kind of paradigm in our culture that everything is about communication. And if we could just communicate better, then everything would be better. And we mean something very specific by that. We usually mean the words we're saying. Sometimes we talk about body language and how that matters and tone of voice a little bit. But mostly we think if we just got all the right words right and we just said all the right things, that our relationships would just be wonderful. And we go to therapy for this and we read books and we go to trainings. And what if communication wasn't actually what we think it is? Now, I came across this quote from C.S. Lewis and it really completely reframed the concept of communication for me. And I've thought about it completely differently ever since. And actually, one of the reasons I want to talk about this today is because I've been creating this training that we just did recently. And in creating this training, I was talking about the natural law and about tools to help women to better understand and recognize truth and all this kind of thing. And I wanted the people that attended to have an experience with women who have been through our program and had a great experience. And it was so interesting as I was going back through so many of those testimonials and vetting them for this training, there was this common theme. There were a few common themes. Truth is obviously one of those, but one of the common themes was relationships. And one of the things that these women said over and over again was how much better their relationships were. All of their relationships with God and with themselves, which is what level one is all about, of course, but then their relationships with everybody else had improved. And it has to do, at least partly, with this concept of communication. So this is the sentence that I read from C.S. Lewis that really tipped me off to actually communication is something very different than we think it is. He said, "I have tried to assume nothing that is not professed by all baptized and communicating Christians." Okay, I had never thought of the connection between communication, communicating, and communion. I don't know why, it has just never occurred to me that they must have the same root word and must have something to do with each other. Because communion, of course, is when Christians go to church and they take Christ's body and blood, like they take the sacrament is another word that is used for it. And it's called communion. And so this really got me thinking. And I was like, wait a minute. Communicating, of course, we can see in the context of this sentence, he meant the people who are baptized and taking communion regularly. So they're very active Christians. They're very committed to their faith. And so I went back and did some research, as I do. And I went and looked up some of the root words and some of the older definitions. If you've been around very long, you know that the 1828 dictionary is a resource we use often because we want to find out what words used to mean and how we can get closer to what those meanings really are so we can better understand. The word commune, we sometimes say commune, comes from some ancient Latin words. One of them means identity and one of them means unity. So when you put this all together, and I won't give you the whole backstory there, basically the very root of the word commune is to unite your identities. Isn't that fascinating? This is because when we're communing, when we're in a commune, when we're taking communion, and when we're communicating, what we're supposed to be doing is unifying our identities. What we're supposed to be doing is taking two things that are different and apart and helping them to understand each other better, to meld into each other more, to bring them into unity. Unity in many ways, unity of purpose, unity of understanding. And some of the definitions in the 1828 dictionary were to converse, to talk together, familiarity, and then, of course, to take the Lord's Supper. So then when you go into the 1828 dictionary and you look up the word communicating, here's the first two definitions: to impart, to give to another as a partaker, to confer for joint possession, to bestow as that which the receiver is to hold, retain, use, or enjoy. And the second definition is to impart reciprocally or mutually, to have or enjoy a share of. So from a Christian perspective, when you're taking communion, God is giving something to you and you are giving something back. And it's this giving and receiving, this beautiful process of coming together, imparting reciprocally or mutually, and participating in an activity that is meant to unite, and participating in this activity that is meant to unite your identity. And there's also this beautiful connection to giving. The communication is largely about giving and enjoying and receiving. These are elements of communication that we never touch on. We never think about communication this way. We're thinking about our body language, we're thinking about sets, we're talking about active listening or empathic listening and things like that. We're not thinking about, okay, in order for us to commune, in order for us to communicate, what's our goal? What are we trying to do? We're trying to unite our identities. And what we're participating in is a giving reciprocally, giving to each other in meaningful ways and receiving from each other and enjoying that giving and receiving process. So when I'm thinking about, okay, I'm in a relationship with someone and communication is a huge part of what's going on. And if I'm thinking about that relationship as a place where I give and receive in order to unite our identities, it's a completely different experience for me. Now, another aspect of this communication and how it changes our relationships is that Scott Peck taught this principle that the most important form that the work of love takes is attention. So when we think about great people in history, there's someone obviously of great love and compassion, but there's someone who does a lot of giving without expecting anything in return. And they pay a lot of close attention. They pay close attention to what they're giving, how they're giving, who they're giving it to. There's this really great book that we use in level 3 of the Academy of Charities, modern day charity. And I think it's called Toxic Charity or something like that. And it's all about how in our modern day, we are generous beings. Like we like to help each other. We like to give to each other. And it's also become very popular to be philanthropic. The problem is that in our desire to be generous and to gain those feelings of giving, we've created charities where we remove from people the self-reliance they should be building for themselves. And so we engage in this relationship where we're trying to give, we're trying to help someone, but actually we're stripping them of their personal integrity and their own internal self-reliance because we remove things or we provide things in their society that they should be working for themselves. And so we can still offer aid. We're not here to get into that, but this book is all about how we have to pay close attention. We have to think about who we're giving the money to, what we're giving it for, what's going to happen to the receiver on the other end. How can our gift of giving be reciprocal and mutual? How can we communicate, be in communion with people who we would like to give aid to in a way that lifts them, that makes them better, that improves their life? And of course, we do this in principled ways. That's what we do at the Mission Driven Mom is we identify those underlying principles and we honor those. And that brings that growth and flourishing that we want to have. And so in order to communicate and unite our identities, we must give and receive with joy. And we must be therefore full of love for ourselves and for other people. We must be loving properly, which is something that is such an abused word in our culture, and we're doing that all wrong. Many times, we're doing many unhealthy things in the name of love. And Scott Peck is showing us one other aspect here, and that is attention. We must give our attention in appropriate ways. He says this beautiful thing that I just really felt like applied to moms. Listen to your child enough, and you will come to realize that he or she is quite an extraordinary individual. The more you know about the child, the better you will be able to teach. He says it's a cycle, this upward creative cycle of evolution and growth. Value creates value and love begets love. He says part of true listening is the discipline, the giving up or setting aside of one's own prejudices, frames of reference and desires, so as to experience as far as possible the speaker's world from inside, stepping into his or her shoes. And he goes on to say that it's this beautiful unification of speaker and listener. And Covey talks about how we cannot do this. We cannot truly commune. We can't communicate clearly just with tactics. It's this, and we talk about this in the Academy too. He calls it the personality versus the character ethic, that the love has to really be there. He says the key is genuinely seek the welfare of the individual, to let the person get to the problem and solution at their own pace. This kind of understanding transcends technique. We need to have skills, but let me reiterate that the skills will not be effective unless they come from a sincere desire to understand. And why do we have that sincere desire to understand? Because we genuinely want to commune. And because we recognize that to be in relationship with anyone, to be in relationship with God, to be in relationship relationship with ourselves, to be in relationship with other people, means to better understand them. It means to listen deeply, to pay close attention, and to really try to understand and step in that person's shoes and live and see the world from their perspective. And then to try to give in that relationship in some meaningful way. And we can do this even with ourselves. And I was in doing this training and listening to these women, it just went back to this. We start with love of God and love of yourself and MDM Academy Level 1. And one of the most important reasons why we journal and why we have discussions, why those educational principles are so vital, is because they allow us to listen to ourselves, to be in empathy with ourselves, to unite our own identity with ourselves. A lot of these women talk about these really false beliefs that they have and how the Academy helped them peel away the layers of false belief. And those false beliefs are there because we don't listen to ourselves enough. We don't truly try to empathize with ourselves. And then we don't get at the root. Instead of placing blame and trying to figure out, what did we do wrong? Why am I screwed up? Why am I doing all these things wrong? We say, okay, what's the principle that can help me course correct here? I understand this false belief that I've been holding. I understand because I've tried to unify my identity with myself and with God and put those in proper order and align them with principles. Now I know better how to commune with myself as I commune with God and his truths. It's so beautiful how it like all comes together. And then we gain all this understanding of ourselves and we come to value ourselves better and to know what it is that we value. I put in my communication, I'm set up to give something and not just take something. I'm trying to unite my identity with someone else and I'm trying to genuinely hear, value them, and they are receiving from me unconditional love, acceptance, and attention. And this is something that moms have a really hard time doing, slowing down and taking the time to give themselves the attention that they need. And they think, unfortunately, a lot of the time that the attention that they need is around comforts or around soothing activities or playful activities. And sometimes it's not that at all. It's that they have real deep needs that aren't being met. And it might be work to meet those needs. And it's always better to pay attention to those and meet those needs. Now, I want to just finish up with one more aspect. I don't have a lot to say today about this connection, except for just to share these thoughts with you and to give you new frames of reference for thinking about how you're relating to yourself and to other people, the forms of communication you're engaging in, making the connection between communing and recognizing that this is at the heart. Communication really does matter, but we're going about it all wrong. We think that communication is tactics and skill sets and reframing and using I statements and watching our body language. And it's not. It's all about intention. It's all about the love for ourselves and for God and for others that we're paying the price to build, the attention that we're giving and the gift that we're giving out of being who we are, the very best we know how, leveling up by living truth the best we know how, seeking out those truths and trying to give that out as lovingly as we can by paying attention and truly listening and trying to see the world through others' eyes, even our own, even paying attention to those false beliefs we're holding and taking the time to wade through all of that. Ultimately, why? Why do we care so much? Why does communication matter so much? Why do we want to unite our identities and to give our attention and to have these reciprocal, joyful experiences? From a selfish perspective, it's because it's human beings that create the most meaning in our lives. That's where the purpose to go on living ultimately really comes from, is serving and loving the people around us. And we know that happiness is drawn. I don't have time to get into it today, but the Harvard study is fantastic to show us that the people who live the longest and report having the happiest lives have the highest quality relationships. Relationships are everything. And that Harvard study over 80 or 90 years at this point now, studying multiple generations, that's the one biggest takeaway, is that everything stems from the quality of our relationships. And we can have the most beautiful relationships that we could ever want with God and with ourselves. Those are always completely in our control. And so they deserve our highest level of attention. And we really need to listen, to give the attention and to commune with God and commune with ourselves. And from those relationships will blossom all of the other relationships in our lives. And we can do that. We can control that right now. we can help those relationships to bloom and be beautiful. So that's one reason, and a very important reason, that we benefit the best, the most, like that our lives will lack happiness, fulfillment, and meaning if we don't pay the price to know how to have the highest quality relationships possible. And we can affect and up-level the quality of all of our other relationships when we work on our core relationships first. But there's an even deeper reason. And I'm going to quote from an article called The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis that is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to give you what he says at the end of that. And it's a couple paragraphs long. Of course, he's C.S. Lewis, and he says it way better than I can. Why put in all this energy? Why strain ourselves and pay attention to the point where it hurts and it's hard? In fact, one last little note. When Scott Peck talks about paying attention and doing the work that love requires by paying attention, he shares an experience where he was sweating because he was working so hard to understand something that a lecturer was teaching that was very difficult to understand. And so he knows those who have really tried to listen to their children, who have really tried to listen to their spouse or their friend or their sibling or their parents, and really try to get into their shoes, it's a lot of hard work. So why would we do that? Selfishly, we would do it because it benefits us. But there's a higher, more important reason. Here's what C.S. Lewis says is the most important reason that we want to learn how to commune with each other. It may be possible for each of us to think too much of his own potential to grow, to be full of glory hereafter in heaven, because that can become a major priority, especially for people who are very faithful in their religious practices. It doesn't matter to them what happens after this life. They do want to have a wonderful life hereafter. But it is possible, he says, to think about that too much. But it is hardly possible for him to think too often or too deeply about that of his neighbor. The weight or load or burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid on my back. It's like when Jesus says, if you love me, feed my sheep. It's this kind of a principle that it's wonderful for us to want to fix our own problems and have the most beautiful, wonderful families that we can have, and to want to reach our potential and grow as individuals. But the higher reason for learning to commune and communicate, for putting our relationships at the very top of our priority list. And unfortunately, most of our educational systems do not give us the proper tools to do these relationships well. And so we show up feeling unprepared in our lives for the things that are very most important. What we can do is focus on communing with God and ourselves and communing with others as well, and letting that bleed into the quality of relationships we're building with all the people in our lives, and thinking about their glory hereafter, where they're headed, how their life is going, and how we can aid them on the journey. This load or weight of glory, this responsibility to care for my neighbor and to try to help him to be the best he can be, is a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will be broken. It is a serious thing to live in a society of potential gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may be one day a creature which you would be strongly tempted to worship, or one who might be a horror and a corruption such as you now would only meet in a nightmare. All day long we are in some degree helping each other to one or the other of these destinations, to heaven or to hell. It is the light of these overwhelming possibilities. It is with the awe and circumspection proper to them that we should conduct all our dealings with one another. Next to the blessed sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. I think we all get a sense of this when we're with a newborn baby, and we know that we're on holy ground. When we first see each other as the glorious beings that we are, with infinite potential, then we can put communion and relationships at the center of our lives, and we can get serious about learning how to navigate all of our relationships with much more love, empathy, attention, and giving, because we can keep giving out in all of our relationships in appropriate boundaried ways, in ways that lift us and others, in ways that are principled, and everyone will be lifted. So I want to finish up with a few questions for you. When you communicate, are you trying to give or to get? Are you trying to connect or control? And do people feel seen and accepted by you? And I want you to ponder what the world might look like if, when each of us thought of communication, we immediately thought of communion. What if we thought of imparting and bestowing and giving? What if we thought of love and needs and really trying to unify our identities? What kind of a world could we create if we were all focused on that? This is why at the Mission Driven Mom, we focus so heavily on relationships, because they are at the heart of our happiness or unhappiness. They bring the deepest meaning to our lives, and all our relationships are made or broken by our ability to commune and to communicate. And in light of this theme of improving our ability to commune and communicate and putting our relationships at the front of our lives, I want to invite you to an encore of our recent training. I'm going to give that presentation again in April. And if you couldn't make it, or a friend or a family member couldn't make it, and you're wondering what we discussed and you want those tools that I covered, please sign up. Join me. The link is in the description, and I'll see you in that training in April. In the meantime, think about communion. Think about communicating. Unite your identity and give your attention and watch the beautiful relationships that unfold in your life. See you next time.